County and Essex County, and sort of the heydays of this industry fell in the years from 1860 to 85, the quarter century. After 1860, Civil War, of course, was a boom for it. And so by the census year 1880, in Clinton and Essex counties combined, there were some 8,000 to 10,000 men employed in these two counties in all aspects of the iron industry. Only a portion directly in mining, but smelting and processing, preparing the ore, smelting, fabrication from the finished products, and that included woodcutters and charcoal makers and teamsters. The entire industry, very substantial workforce indeed. We were recognized at the time as one of the leading centers of the iron industry in the country by the U.S. Census when New York State led the nation, or was in third place, let me say, in third place in overall iron ore production, exceeded only by Pennsylvania, number one state, and Michigan. We turned out to 16% of the nation's iron ore in 1880, a high water mark in relative terms, but the absolute tonnage, of course, was much greater in World War II in those times. And as a further indication of the importance here in this region, only one other county in the country, namely Marquette, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, exceeded Essex County in overall iron output. 2 or 3 or 4 of the leading mines in the whole nation were in Essex County. So by 1880, Lion Mountain was just getting into the throes of greatness. Hadn't really quite come into it yet, but was certainly well on the way. Well, this industry then provided the livelihood and really became the be-all and end-all for tens of communities in the North Country, exerting a widespread, naturally immense influence on the overall economy, political affairs, social life, and so forth, as I'll be showing here with the slides. So, 1880s, things are going fairly well, but by the 90s there's a national financial panic. 93 in the Arrowhead country of northeastern Minnesota, Wasabi iron ranges are literally out there, hills and low mountains of rich hematite ore right on the surface. They scooped up with power equipment loaded onto Great Lakes freighters and hauled to steel-making centers on the south shores of the Great Lakes by train up to Pittsburgh, the upper Ohio, and so forth. And so things are moving westward. Dramatic changes at the same time in business organization, sweeping technological change, and all of these forces really rendered untenable many of the North Country operations here. What had been considered inexhaustible supplies of iron ore locally by that time had proved to be rather exhaustible and been depleted in many cases. So a large number of factors, and we were mining and smelting as well by this primitive means called the bloomery or Cattlemen Forge. Primitive, but it seemed to fit with the pattern of life here and seasonal occupations and so on in the North Country. And according to record, the last bloomery forge in the entire U.S. Shut down at nearby Standish around 1905. So in the early part of the 20th century. Well, After this time, the smelting phase pretty well died out, although blast furnace did continue to operate at Standish until the late 1930s. It was dismantled and taken to Fort Henry, and that was the end of the smelting phase. Mining continued here in Lion Mountain, the town of Dannemora, of course, western Clinton County, until 1967. Chateauguay and Ore and Iron Company gave way to Republic Steel Corporation in the 1930s, the late 30s, early 40s, the town of Mariah, then out here in Dannemora. And by the 60s, Republic had extensive holdings itself in the Lake Superior country, way up in the pine forests of Shepherdville and central Quebec and Labrador, and out in that area, in West Africa and other places. Foreign competition, we're beginning to feel the rivalry of foreign competition. And at the same time, the mines in Lion Mountain are getting deeper and deeper and more costly to extract the ore and to get it to the surface. Moreover, the physical plant here was increasingly obsolete, inefficient. The workforce was still very strong, dedicated, loyal people in this area. But Republic, the board in Cleveland, Ohio, made the decision to phase out Lion Mountain, so that happened in 1967, and then the axe fell a few years later in the early 70s in the town of Morovek in Essex County. So the North Country iron industry, having begun about 1760, runs till the early 1970s, right? Something in excess of 2 centuries. Could it revive? Could it come back? Well, that's the $64 question. There's still plenty of ore here, probably more than ever extracted till this point. And so we couldn't rule it out completely, but it seems very problematic to me. The startup costs would be exorbitant, and there's just a plentiful supply of iron ore on the world market, of course. It's all a matter of supply and demand. A lot of iron and steel already in circulation, in junk cars, and all sorts of other objects that we've manufactured. So the cost, and now we would have to comply with the regulations of the APA, the DEC. You put all of this together, and I think the return is most unlikely. But some folks do harbor these dreams. I've heard them, especially in the town of Mariah, exclaim that the ore there is, it's better than money in the bank, they say locally. It's not subject to thievery or rot or rust. It's there. Big industry will be back. It will have to come, return to the North Country someday. We'll see. It's not beyond the pale, but seems most unlikely. Well, that's a thumbnail sketch of the industry overall, and what I'm hoping to do here again is evoke the sense of place, to recount and bring back the spirit of the times, put Lion Mountain in the overall regional context. So we won't get to Lion Mountain for a bit, but to give you some background here. And I'm sorry we have an excess of light in the building, which doesn't help at all, but doesn't seem to be anything we can do about it. In any case, the map here showing northeastern New York and the arrow focusing on the town of Mariah in Essex County. by any measure, the dominant mining center of the North Country and ranking second overall in total production here at Lion Mountain Chateauguay ores in western central Clinton County. You might have heard of the Star Lake production over here in southern St. Lawrence, but that's another story, and we're not going to concern ourselves with that. And so, distribution of iron ore resources. Each of these dots represents a deposit of some sort. The magnetite in the granitic and igneous rocks of the Adirondack region, Dannemora here, various deposits out the Ausable Valley, the Salmon, Saranac. There's Lion Mountain, of course, between Upper Chateauguay and Shazy Lakes, the uppermost Hudson, other places, widespread deposits. Early in the 19th century, all it took was the iron ore, fluxing material, limestone, and a source of fuel that could be supplied with the extensive hardwood forests of the region, reduced to charcoal in these sort of kilns by controlled burning, water to drive the wheels of industry, and bingo, you've got it. All you need is a market from there on. And so there were many scattered hamlets and villages centered on the charcoal industry. And we have, fortunately, the documentary evidence here of one photographer of Adirondack fame, 19th century, from the Queensberry Glens Falls, Seneca Ray Stoddard. This is a Stoddard view, and it depicts the charcoal making operation out here near Chateauguay Lake. At some point, I'm not sure of the exact location, but these were short-lived for the most part because the wood supply was quickly exhausted and they moved on. Well, the overall North Country iron industry was really a two-bit affair until transportation connections improved with the outside. A key event here was the linking of the upper Hudson with Lake Champlain, the Champlain Canal here at Whitehall in 1823. So we could send out barges of Adirondack ore, especially to the burgeoning industrial area of the Capital District. Troy was outstanding in that regard as a manufacturing center of agricultural implements, heating stoves, and so forth. And so those connections proved very helpful and really put the North Country iron industry on a roll. This is ironworks established roughly up through the first half of the 19th century. We wouldn't expect you to see all of those dots, but the point this map tries to make is the pattern was riverine for the obvious reason that the falling water turned the wheels of industry. And so the streams, Saranac, Ausable, Beauquet, and whatever. Tens of communities were founded and largely supported by the iron industry. Another mainly riverine pattern. Quite a few of these are ghost towns today. There we have iron ore production in the region, the two-county region in 1879. The dominance of the town of Moriah, way out in the western extremity of the town of Crown Point in Essex County. This is Palmer Hill in the Ausable Valley, and Lion Mountain out here. The map underrepresents Lion Mountain, which was really coming into its own. If this had been done 5 years later, it would show Lion Mountain as a more prominent center. So Stoddard took his camera and visited one of these bustling places called Hammondville, 1,300 feet above the level of Lake Champlain out there in the western part of the town of Crown Point. This is private Crown Point Iron Company's railroad crossing Hutt's Trestle Welcome to Hammondville. It's nowadays nothing but an abandoned forest, but here in the 1870s, 750, 800 people lived there. It was inhabited largely by Scandinavian folks, Swedes, some Finns, Norwegians, and so on, and the rail station, company store, church, schoolhouse, and so forth. The miners out at Hammondville is captured by Stoddard, a hard-working crew, and many of these companies operated on the puritanical notion that idleness is the devil's workshop, and they kept these miners in the mines or cutting wood or doing something 6.5 days a week, 10 to 12-hour days, pre-union era, of course. They were always exhausted. They didn't have time to cause trouble, and so that was part of the approach. Some of that ore from Hammondville came down with these modern blast furnaces in the 1880s and met northward moving coal out of the anthracite fields of northeastern Pennsylvania, where the Delaware and Hudson Railroad started as a canal company and brought coal to the North Country and eventually became functionally linked with the Chateauguay Ore and Iron Company, the D&H did. But here they're making Bessemer pig iron at Crown Point on the shores of Lake Champlain. In the Ausable Valley, examples of mining communities at Arnold Hill. This one had a century of life. Or Palmer Hill also, and this is north of Ausable Forks in the town of Blackbrook. But a substantial mining area over there. It's pretty tough to get the perspective, but I'm attempting here to show you this cavernous opening, a drift in effect, and down into the mines at Palmer Hill. We might recognize this as the view from Route 9 and Ausable Chasm here, downstream from Keysville. Rainbow Falls early on caught the eyes of would-be industrialists who harbored great dreams of creating an industrial empire at this place based on water power and other resources. It was called Birmingham Falls in those days, and so part of the wheelhouse still remaining. You can see this from the bridge, Ausable Chasm. And here we have a Stoddard view with the waterworks, the raceway, and the wheelhouse all intact. The Mooney's Horse Nail Company up on the hill that employed 150 to 200 men. One of the regional specialties in terms of fabricated finished products was horse nails. We're talking about a horse and buggy era, of course, and the nation had millions of horses whose hoofs had to be shod, and the use of horse nails. High demand and a regional specialty as the Ausable Horse Nail Company here in Keysville. That building is still standing in Keysville. The next scene takes us upriver to Clintonville, and this is from the Beers Atlas of 1869. If you were to examine this up close, you'd see all of the land here is alienated by the Peru Steel and Iron Company, forge, rolling mill, wheel shop, boat anchor manufacturers and sawmills and so forth. At this point, the dam was put across, water diverted out there through the canal, which is about a half-mile in length, and that gave better control of the water. Barges of ore and charcoal and so forth could be floated out, and down to the end to what stood here until about 1875 or 80, one of the largest Cattlemen Forge operations in the world, with 16 fires at this place. So time has taken its toll, obviously, in spring floods and all of that. One of my colleagues at SUNY Plattsburgh, Gordon Pollard, in the anthropology department, has conducted a number of painstaking archaeological research expeditions at this place. Perhaps you've heard of that in his commendable work. But we're going up valley still to Osable Forks, where the movers and shakers were James Rogers and his brother John Weed Rogers, who formed in the 1830s the Sable Iron Company, and later known as the J&J Rogers Iron Company, centered in Osable Forks with manufacturing community at nearby Black Brook and at Jay. And so an interior view of this Cattlemen Forge, this primitive operation here, basically a glorified blacksmith's hearth, so forth. We don't have time to go into all of the technique here, but it was different from the blast furnace operation. So at Osable Forks, still known today as Rolling Mill Hill in Osable Forks, and the Rogers Company store stood on Main Street right until the 1930s, office and store there. In the town of Moriah then, the telltale evidence, obviously, of a mining landscape with the ore sand heaps here. And so early on, as early as 1810 to 15, the iron industry commenced in that area, both mining and the smelting, with the Port Henry Iron Ore Company. Witherby Sherman was the big one there prior to Republic. And so throughout the town of Moriah, there are these relics and ruins as the base of an old blast furnace here at Moriah Center, built around 1850, the Colburn furnace. The brawny miners descending into the pits at Mineville, the Don B. shaft, Donald B. Gillis shaft. This is a World War II vintage with their headlamps on and ready to go, another day's work. So in the town of Moriah, no one could miss it. The obvious here, this gigantic mountain of ore sand with the nearby separator, crushing plant, and all of that in Moriah. Some of the ore has been taken and pressed into cement blocks and used for building purposes, and some pretty fine housing, actually, in the town of Moriah, as we see there. Well, the North Country iron industry was undoubtedly responsible for bringing to the region many ethnic stocks who probably wouldn't have found their way here otherwise. Slavic and Mediterranean peoples, East Europeans, as revealed in the architectural features of the Polish Catholic Church at Witherby. Now this church is closed for want of a priest, so they've combined with, I guess it's St. Michael's All Saints Church there. But if you are interested and you're the adventuresome type, you could go way over to the headwaters of the Hudson, town of Newcomb, this place called Tahawas. This blast furnace was blown in 1854. It's the best preserved blast furnace in the whole northeastern corner of New York State. It's still intact. You can crawl right inside of that. It's a very interesting place to visit. It's depicted by an artist in woodcut at the time, the associated village called Adirondack without the K on the end. Now we come back closer to home and move our way out toward Lion Mountain, and Smith Williams and Andrew Williams and Smith Weed, rather, the movers and shakers of this area. They had not only iron mines in the Saranac Valley near Clayburgh, on either side of it, branches of the Saranac, lumber mills, but finally in the 1860s put together the capital to form the Chateauguay Ore and Iron Company. One of those places near the forks of the Saranac is now a ghost town. There are a couple ghost towns there based on iron, Williamsburg and Petersburg. This is all that remains across from Redford, near the town dump over there. That's the old dynamite shack at Redford. And then, as most of you would realize, no doubt, when State Warden of Corrections, Ransom Cook, in the 1830s, was looking for a place to locate his maximum security prison. He cast a net to the North Country, and it was known there was a substantial deposit of ore there in Dannemora, and so the prison site was chosen with the express purpose, of course, of bringing the convicts to the North Country and gainfully employing them in the mining and iron smelting industry. So that happened in the 1840s, and Dannemora is named for its sister town in Sweden, Dannemora, Sweden, which is a century-long legendary iron center. This is a Stoddard view right on the prison grounds at Dannemora, probably 1870s, somewhere 80s in that time frame. Bowen and Signer's Iron Works, a rolling mill, rolling and slitting mill, right there at the, I think it's Burnt Hill Road and Route 3 in Saranac was the site of this. Not to be confused, of course, with Saranac Lane, the village of Saranac. Some of the rolled and slit iron came down to the lower river and was converted into horse nails here at Plattsburgh, the Saranac Horse Nail Works. Then we read in American history, we've all been to school and studied, and we, conjure up in our minds these rip-roaring, lusty, wild boom towns, Virginia City, Deadwood Gulch, Tombstone, and so forth of the American West, Cripple Creek, all the color, all the excitement, the fervor, the hustle and bustle. We had the same thing here. It was called Lion Mountain. And so this is Lion Mountain in 1880, showing the old plank road. The caption says essentially 374 or Belmont Street. This is right out in front of the back of us here, and the mining center up on the hill. So surface works in the early years and shallow drifts that increased with depth, of course, with time. One of the early operations are more focused and better pictures of these downstairs. They didn't come out quite as well as they could have, and again the excess light here. But it was a pioneer place. We're looking at Lion Mountain, 1883. This photograph actually was taken by the venerable Adirondack surveyor, Verplanck Colvin, and he entitled it A Rustic Cabin in this place in 1883, only it wasn't Lion Mountain. The original name of Lion Mountain was what? Rogersfield. Not quite sure when the name changed from Rogersfield to Lion Mountain, but a rustic cabin at Rogersfield. Our friend Stoddard aptly made the observation that there were many parallels between Lion Mountain and those ghost towns, the American West, all the hustle bustle and so forth, the mushroom growth. But he said, quite approvingly, that in Lion Mountain there are no gunslingers, there are no prostitutes, there are no gamblers. He says people of that ilk simply were not tolerated in than Lion Mountain. So, always liked that observation of Stoddard, the pioneer days. And here we have the log house scene. And this is up First Street. Of course, we're heading on our way out Standish. 1885, the caption says, these log structures, many of which still stand today, upgraded and kept in good repair and some fairly decent housing. So it's still there, but it was rather primitive in these early pioneer days here at Lion Mountain. Starting again in the late 1860s, 70s, 80s. By 1883, a reporter from the Press Republican came out and did a big story on the village and the mining scene and observed that it was the most bustling place in Clinton County with the residents of over 3,000 people already. Boarding houses and stores and crowding and congestion, a boom town. An early drift or shaft there in the mining apparatus, somewhere near the turn of the century, physical plant up on the hill, and part of the operation as well up in that vicinity. Yet another scene, separator and so forth, near the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. Railroading, of course, was critical. Transportation. You have access to markets, and this is the Chateauguay Railroad, a private company that tied in then with the D&H as time went on. So Lion Mountain, formerly so isolated, did get its railroad pushed out here, private enterprise from the prison, and in December of 1879, the first trainload of low-phos ore from Lion Mountain, pulled out of the bowels of the earth, right under us here, rolled off the mountain and down into Plattsburgh. So that really triggered major development. And then we come to the 1920s, and here the new physical plant, head frames and conveyors, silos, and separators, and of course, so forth. The Williams separator, Mr. Williams, the president of the Chateauguay Ore and Iron Company, 1923-24. This was completed. Another view of it that dominated the scene there up on the hill. And the head frame, roughly around 1930. Miners checking out the man's chute and the ore shaft and so forth. The head frame again. The head frame's gone now. Some of these buildings are still in place, but in a dilapidated state. It's called overhead stoping, seen in the 1930s, drilling holes in the ceiling and placing explosives there and letting gravity do most of the work, where the iron fell down into chutes and into the cars. But there were many, many miles of underground haulage ways, and as time passed, of course, deeper and deeper, and the cost of extraction is always rising. So it was quite expensive before this ore ever saw the light of day, and again rendered the area untenable in a competitive sense with the open pit mines elsewhere in the country. Underground haulage. Critical element was not only the mining, but keeping the drills sharpened and repair shops, and so these were spaced at different levels, of course, throughout the mines. Some of the ore chutes here, and loading into the car by gravity, again, and eventually up to the surface, into the crusher, breaking down, magnetic separation, Most of the iron here had an iron content of only 25 to 30%. Pure magnetite, 72.4%. The other 25.6 is oxygen, and that can be separated only by smelting process. But mechanically, the theoretical upper limit would be 72.4, and so it was brought up and mechanically separated and upgraded, beneficiated is the technical term, to about 68%, and then mixed with a bit of pulverized anthracite coal, lime, sprayed with oil perhaps, and a flame drawn through it, and that caused it to fuse together to create these clinkers known as sinters, S-I-N-T-E-R. So the sinter was the product that got sent off to blast furnaces in Lackawanna, in Pittsburgh, in Waterville, and other places. Well, the local people are eager to remind you that some of the best iron ore in the world exists right beneath our feet here, and it's more than local pride. It is absolutely true. And Chateauguay low-phos iron earned a celebrated reputation the world over and won many gold medals at international exhibitions. It's especially notable for its superb qualities and tensile strength. It gives iron the ability to stretch without breaking, and enormous, extraordinary weight-bearing capacity. So some of the famous bridges of the country, for example, those massive wire ropes and the great cables, the Brooklyn Bridge, George Washington carries 16 lanes of traffic. Very impressive. I think you'll agree. Golden Gate, other places, they're built in part from Chateauguay ore. So the North Country made its contribution to the industrial growth, urban development of the U.S., and we need to take pride. We need to celebrate these things and be justifiably proud of them. Of course, the compressors, electricity was a key element, and the compressors that furnished the air power to run the drills, various other operations were key. And it's also been observed that these things, the pulse, the rhythm, the beat of the compressors could have been heard in those days throughout Lion Mountain community. But in one sense, apparently, nobody did hear it until they fell silent in 1967. And that was kind of a metaphor that this was the heartbeat of the community, in effect. And once the pulse stopped, once the heart ceased to function, livelihood was gone. The sad reminder, the mines had closed, and so it left loyal, hard-working, committed miners in Lion Mountain struggling and striving, of course, to keep body and soul together. I think we would all agree they've succeeded eminently. An aerial view here of Lion Mountain in the mid-1950s, and a few street scenes, some of the housing and upper part of First Street, much the same thing today. Many of those towers are still there. View from Chase's station up through Belmont Street, seen here in the 1940s, still company housing. Now, of course, it's privately owned, still the same scene there that we find today. So we have many reminders around Lion Mountain. The legacy assumes many forms, including place names, West Mine Street here up on the hill, and some of the still standing structures, the Chateauguay Ore and Iron Company, Mill Number 3, 1917. This operated for only a decade or so, and was brought down by a mysterious, somewhat mysterious fire then served as a repair shop and warehouse and so forth. It's still standing. It's the large building here, very sturdy. These buildings, the hoist house is still there. But the early train station is now gone. It served from 1879 until standard gauge rail came in and replaced the narrow gauge in 1903. Then the new depot down on First Street, which is Greg's Tavern. I guess it's in limbo a bit this time. The company office enlarged here in the 20s and 30s by J.R. Linney, but that's all gone. I took this view about 20-some years ago, and we recall with fondness a wonderful tour of the ruins given me by Bernard Hart a few years after the mines had closed. But vandalism, the time, all the elements, things are going to rack and ruin quickly. It doesn't take long, really. And so the new housing, Phillips Court, built, I believe, in the 1940s, and vintage is still occupied for the most part, that area. Give me just a second. I'm going to switch trays here. And okay, thanks. Thank you, Claire. So we've seen this photo of the miners. It's downstairs, and most of the individuals are identified. Have a look at that. We have here some of the personnel. One of the Linneys here, Bill or Bob. That's Bill in this case, and other engineers, supervisors. And more of the mining staff. So attempt to bring back the personalities, the times, the days. Many of you would recognize Joseph R. Linney, of course, who was a dominant manager here, kind of an autocratic style, having arrived in February of 1919 from Old Forge, Pennsylvania, and was Lion Mountain personified of sorts for the next 25 years. So he left and moved to Plattsburgh in 1944 and was succeeded then by his sons, Bill and Bob. So the Linneys, integral part of the late Chateauguay days, Ord Iron Company, and then Republic Steel with the Linney here presenting the award. Other proud miners receiving their safety awards, in this case. And social events centered around mining. Go to Tupper Lake, of course. It's the Lumberjack Festival and all that. But in Lion Mountain, the game in town was mining. And really the only game in town, the only reason there ever was a Lion Mountain in Rogersville is the presence of this superior quality ore here. So the drilling contest. And the 1960s vintage supervisory staff. We have a somewhat more youthful Tony Shoesda here, for example. Bill Blumstrand, I believe this is Tara Savage. And there are probably some chases there, and chances are Duke Chase or somebody. Yeah, and different ones. Bowling was a major activity, much followed avidly here. And so one of the successful bowling teams that celebrated their successes out at the Hollywood or other places. That's in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay. And so Republic based in Cleveland, course. So some of the Lion Mountaineers made their way.
We won the bowling tournament and they gave us the banquet.
They gave you the banquet. You won the tournament. They gave you the banquet. And so here's a close-up.
That's the bowlers.
The bowlers, the team. Yes, and others. I've heard so much about some of these folks. For example, this Howard Peg here was noted for his electrical skills, and I almost feel as if I know them, but very hardworking, industrious, honorable people, and a somewhat more youthful and frivolous Tony Schuster and Slave and Chase.
We were single. You can see the married men, they're trying to get away from the table. She was a cigarette girl at the hotel where we had the banquet. So she pulled them.
The bowler. The
Best looking men in the boat.
Okay. This is out in Cleveland, and this guy is
Cherry Rodriguez.
Cherry Rodriguez. Okay, so some of you recognize, of course, those names from Lion Mountain back in the good old days. Iron Shoes, the bobsled here, the Linneys.
Bob Linney, right in there.
Okay.
Bob Linney, John Moore, Bill Stakovich, and Angus Flynn.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and Iron Shoes. And lots of young families and many children, of course. This is the old school up on the hill along Separator Brook before the Linney School opened in 1931 or 32. So another cohort of students probably got a pretty solid education. The 3 R's in those days, no frills and so forth, but it was a solid education. So we have the building abandoned today, and Linney School did open, as we noted, or Lion Mountain School. Linney Auditorium was already there in the early 1930s. Now the prison. So sports were followed avidly, and perhaps you recognize certain individuals.
Third one from the left. That's my kid brother. He's buried in the sin of old friends.
Okay. Is this Slave and Chase? I think it is. Yes. Still bears a resemblance. It's been a few years. Lion Mountain was a progressive place, way ahead of its time. The girls also had their sports. This is a Marvin, Garofsky,
Dr. Martin's daughter.
Lemaire.
The 2 Lemaires are twins, Grace and Blanche.
Yes.
Mary Alfonso still lives here. And the other one's gone.
The girls' basketball team, Lion Mountain High School of 1929. The boys' team in 29. And here's another girls' team, of course, 33. 33 this is. Lion
Mountain. The first one on the left.
Yes, Anna Schuster, right here. Okay. And
That's me, the second one on the left.
Venerable Tony Schuster. Yes.
Oh, the good one.
Another year, another team. So here's Anna again, actually. The good old days. Quite a few moons ago, huh? And this is 21-22 team.
That's the Lion Mountain Town team.
Okay.
Played Joe Bunga.
Yes. Mid-30s. Late Chattagay Ore days. Of course, baseball was a favorite. Chattagay Ore and Iron Company, the early team here. And
He's the young one.
the younger ones. The winning team of the 1940, the Miners, of course. And other social, cultural amenities included the boys' band. This is in the 1920s at the Lion Mountain Post Office Store, hotel area.
So, John, we have the privilege of being directed by John Philip Sousa.
That's right. John Philip Sousa even played under his directorship at one point, not in Lion Mountain, but near Lion Malone. Yes. So there was culture out here, believe it or not. In Lion Mountain in those days, the hotel, store,
Beer garden.
Lion Mountain General Store.
1946 strike.
1946, Tony says. Thank you. The strike was on. The soda fountain in the hotel was...
That man, if anybody knows Pat Healy lived here, that's his father, the bartender.
Okay. So, and a critical facility, of course, was the clinic and health care. Mining is a hazardous occupation.
First aid room in the dry house.
First aid room in the dry house. Many crushed legs and more serious accidents. But I know the names Dr. Kaiser and Dr. Marvin. They're living legends out here in Lion Mountain. And people recall them with great fondness. Those who knew them. Of course, some of the other social aspects were the religious dimensions of the community. So St. Bernard's Catholic Church, founded in 1875, instrumental in getting this going. The Irish community here, the Farrells, the Chases, and those folks, and in St. Bernard's Cemetery here of 1902. St. Bernard's Church, of course, across the way from us, where the rank and file, Slavic, Italian, Spanish, all of those elements worshipped. So if you haven't been out to the cemetery behind the church lately, go out for a stroll, and pretty amazing Slavic names, Lithuanian names. Some of them are tongue twisters. Stanislav, in that case, which
Stanislav
Petrashun. This one,
that name was changed to Kaska.
Kaska, simplified, a Lithuanian name. And how these folks got here, as Tony likes to recount.
Felix was the young man that got killed with two other men, Ray Ducharme, Mike Rabbit, and Felix. Dynamite went off and blew the Ray Ducharme to pieces, but concussion killed these two men.
Oh boy. So, mining accidents, they were casualties of mining accidents. But how it happened, of course, as Tony recalls, the Lithuania at that time was part of the Tsarist Russian Empire. And so many people fled that realm to escape conscription in the Tsar's army. The choice was put a rifle on your shoulder and head for Siberia, or go to Lion Mountain. And once they got at Lion
Boy, if my father was alive, he'd probably tackled it.
Once they got here, and the word went back to home and kinship ties, and then the chain migration phenomenon kicked in. So all of these Slavic peoples, Balto-Slavs, Italians, here the shoes to
Anybody want to
name,
buy a piece of territory?
Lithuanian, household names, of course, to
That's
anybody.
Lithuanian right there.
Lithuanian in Lion Mountain. But we have also well represented French Canadians, Irish, Chase, Farrell, Rogan, Cordic, so on, those kinds of names. And apparently there was a tremendous degree of solidarity and social harmony out here. All these rich ethnic stocks intermingled and mixed with a minimum of friction. They got along well. The community of Lion Mountain was really just an extension of the mines. One big family here. Everybody knew everybody. Shared experience, a hard life in the mines. All of these accidents brought people together.
John Petrowski was a fireman at the old boiler room. And he went, there's a hole outside road, a big dome. He went through that hole to get some loose coal and caved in on him and killed him.
Lots of accidents. Right from Russia, this individual, Alexander Vorpik, came to Lion Mountain. Some of these tombstones out here are even in Cyrillic alphabet.
They're still in good shape, right?
Sure, good shape, right from the old world, from Russia, itself,
John
Narkun, Polish, Lithuanian, another example of the Cyrillic alphabet. So the rich ethnic heritage of the region in the town of Moriah. In the town of Moriah, the fascinating cemetery of Saints Peter and Paul. Just an incredible melange of
Narkun.
names. Yes?
That would be the step-grandfather.
No,
John Narkun married a widow with 2 children. He got killed in the mine, the 2 boys got killed in the mine, and Mr. Banana, 4 of them from the family.
disaster. A representation of Spaniards in the area as well. Some of these apparently came directly from Spain, not via Mexico, but directly from Spain. There was, from the early days, a Protestant presence as well. And so the early Methodist Church up here on School Hill and near Separator Brook, I think was the location, right, of that early, not this building, of course, but the predecessor to this building. There's another view of it with the faithful. And so this building was constructed in the 50s, 60s. The Linneys were pillars of this church, among others. Here we are, of course, right here. And so both elements represented. There is a Protestant corner of the cemetery where we find such individuals as Carl Edward Linden, born in Sweden, January 23, 1858, died at Lion Mountain, February 4, 1892.
They were very good machinists.
Very good machinists, okay, the Swedish peoples. And before we leave, before we leave Lion Mountain proper, I have a few more to take you out to Standish and Chattagay Lake, but I do gratefully acknowledge and want to pay a real heartfelt tribute to 3 of the finest native sons Lion Mountain has ever produced. In my opinion, the generosity of these fellas in sharing their knowledge, their photos, their wives in hospitality. If you go to Peter Quetchin's, if you go to Chase's, they demand you sit down at the kitchen table and have a piece of pie and a cup of coffee. It's Adirondack hospitality at its best. But we have Slave and Chase here, of course, Peter Quetchin and Tony Schuster. I just want to give them a great... outstanding fellas. Of course, there are lots of other upstanding citizens here, but I happen to know those 3 well. The Tolbert's store and mine shaft as we go out to the smelting community associated with Lion Mountain of Standish, initially called Williamstown. Cattlemen Forge built there in 1881 and then replaced by a blast furnace But there was another Cattlemen Forge that operated into the 20th century. The blast furnaces in the stumps at Standish, 1886 or 7 there, 1920s, 30s view. And someone told me this was a photo from Dr. Kaiser. And so the blast furnace, we're missing the very top of it there at Standish, producing this famous pig iron, not the bloomery iron, but the finished pig iron with the trade name Chattagay.
Is that the one you found?
Yeah. I found it out there behind the old office. Mr. Rabideau noticed I was somewhat interested. He said, "Why don't you take it?" And so he helped me load it into my trunk, and I have bequeathed it actually.
Carry it?
You could see this today on display at the fine exhibit, the Adirondack Museum in Blue Mountain Lake. The iron exhibit is discharged over in this area, and local folks recall the days when they were coming back from Malone, Brainsville, or wherever. If there were a fresh dump, they could get their bearings by the glow of the stuff in the night sky. That's Upper Chattagay Lake in the background. This is from the dump out there at Standish. Okay. And the final few scenes take us through the Narrows, Lower Chattagay Lake. Here's the forge. It's also known as Belmont or Chattagay Lake, and it was known as Popeville. You could take your choice of any one of the 4 names. The flowing water, or conveyed from Lion Mountain by sleigh and wagon, depending on the season, and smelted down at that point, shipped out from that point early, and then smelted down there at this great Cattlemen Forge along the river, the community of Popeville. So this reportedly was the largest Cattlemen Forge actually in the world, with 20-some fires. Here's an exterior view of it. It operated for something on the order of 20 years, the early 1870s till the 1890s. So it's a ghost town of sorts. And this scene is, I just wanted us to all remember, if we need any reminder, how privileged we are to live in such remarkable beauty of the North Country, the Adirondack Champlain region, the scenic view here of Upper Chattagay Lake from Jerry Blanch's backyard in Maryland. And so we'll leave you on that inspiring and beautiful note in the sweltering heat. It looks most inviting. Thank you so much for your attention.
Next year is the village's 100th anniversary.
10-5-2000 sounds like some powerful new cleaning agent that just came out at the supermarket. That's our date. And we've got a date with Terry Gilroy in Dannemora. How are you doing, Terry?
Very good, thank you, Gordy.
What's your wife's name?
My wife's name is